we do have Tom E. Curran and Phil Perry, our Patriots insiders, have been covering this. Tom, you deserve it. You had it right from the start. We knew exactly where this was going thanks to your reporting. But still today, when you woke up or when you did get up and saw the news that it was going to happen today, what were both of your initial reactions to this, and what did you think about the press conference?
Well, just start with the press conference. I think it's surreal in a lot of ways to see somebody that we've covered for 24 years, Phil for a long time too, more than a decade, and to realize how many press conferences we've stood in or sat in and listened to Bill Belichick and realizing that this is the last one. I think that the tenor of the press conference was everything the Patriots could have hoped. I think that Bill was outstanding in his commentary, in the way that he went through what this team has meant to him. And I think it's as Bill said, it's a day for celebration, but it's hard to get to a celebratory mood when you realize that they're moving on from, as Robert Kraft probably expressed the mood of the fans much better, the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah, celebration and gratitude is how he put it, and you could feel that. There was real warmth there at the podium today, more than I was expecting. Personally, I actually thought as though we would just see statements released today whenever this news was going to come down, and it was the expectation that this would be what would happen. I anticipated a Robert Kraft statement, a Bill Belichick statement, and that a lot of the things that were said at the podium would be written in those statements. But to hear it from them themselves, to me, expresses again a warmth that I didn't anticipate as this relationship ultimately dissolves.
Yeah, and Curran, what did you think also? Because, Bill talked about not just what everything meant and the Patriots meant to him, but also, what they're going to mean to him moving forward. And then also having Robert Kraft just acknowledge, we'll always be rooting for you, except for when you're playing the Patriots, acknowledging that, Bill's career is going to continue.
I think that Bill's comment about being able to come back here was telling, because that's extremely important to the Kraft family as this divorce happened. Obviously, with Bill Parcells, it was rancorous for years. And even when they moved on from Pete Carroll, Pete was bitter as hell about it. So in this instance, Bill wanted to stay. They did reach an amicable parting, but Bill was hoping to stay on. You could clearly hear that in his comments after the game on Sunday, and then again on Monday especially, so that they were able to, thread the needle in a way that allows Bill Belichick to return here and be celebrated as he should. I mean, you almost felt like putting your hands together at the end of the press conference, which is not our job on this day, but I think everybody has a debt of gratitude toward the guy, and it's great that he will be, seemingly as of this moment, in a position to come back here and celebrate it.
And I thought that was in question as to when he might be comfortable coming back, especially if we know how Bill Belichick got here originally. It was via trade. If the Kraft family decided, boy, our drafts have been pretty bad over the course of the last decade or more, we could use all the draft capital we could get. We could get as many assets as we can to try to restock this team and make it more talented. I think pursuing a trade for Bill Belichick, though, especially if it was maybe a prolonged pursuit of compensation for the greatest coach of all time, that might have led to a rougher break and maybe a burning of bridges that would take a long time to repair. So what we saw here today, to me, represents something that's best for the football team. It might not necessarily be what's best for the roster. Pursuing a pick might be what's best for the roster, but what's best for the organization, the franchise, is being able to welcome Bill Belichick back, maintaining that relationship as best as you can, and it looks like it has been maintained to a degree here today.
Phil, this was a mutual parting of ways. It sounds like they had a couple of days of discussions to try to sort of iron out the details. Why do you think they took a couple of days to do this when it seems like the decision has been made for a while?
Well, you've got a 24-year marriage that you're trying to separate yourselves from, that you're trying to untangle from. A lot of details to be hammered out, maybe language and contracts. Bill Belichick really was. He was the football operation here for a generation. And so you don't just get to Black Monday, have a 10-minute conversation, and say, thanks for everything, we'll see you in the next life. So this was always going to take some time, I think, Tom. I do wonder if the announcement of Nick Saban's retirement yesterday would have delayed this in any way, shape, or form. I'm sure those two guys are in contact all the time. Maybe he knew something was coming there, but it really hasn't taken much time at all. I talked to someone in the building just a couple of days ago who said, could be end of the week, could be end of the month. People here were really in the dark as to what the timeline would be for this.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that the decision was made so far in advance, but there were no conversations had with Bill for a variety of reasons. One, they wanted to give Bill an opportunity at the end of the year and not interrupt him during preparations. I mean, he wasn't going to be fired during the season. That's an indignity that you would not have visit upon Bill Belichick, no matter how bad the team got. And it went to 2-10 at one point. But I think when you look at the situation and what had to transpire, you did have to allow Bill to make his pitch. What went wrong in your mind? What can you salvage? What would you like to see happen? So it wasn't going to happen on Monday, and Tuesday certainly I think was a similar tack. They were not going to do it on Tuesday, but the period of time that passed allowed Bill to understand that the decision had been made, that there was coming back. I mean, when we practically speak about Bill coming back and any pitch he could have made, he wasn't going to get an extension, so he would have been a lame duck head coach, understanding that ownership had already wanted to go in a different direction. So that really wasn't going to be something that added up to bringing him back, in my mind, no matter what he was going to be able to put forth as a plan. So it was the way to do it. You can't just flush it, even though the decision has been made for quite some time.
Guys, listen, I know today it was announced that, Bill Belichick is mutually parting ways with the Patriots, but it's not ever just Bill Belichick, right? You have an entire staff of assistant coaches and scouting guys and personnel people whose lives are all affected by this decision. Have you had a chance to talk to anyone else within the organization, how they're reacting to this news and what's next for them?
Well, there was a number of Patriot staffers were here, current and former. Josh McDaniels was here. Dan Kraft was here. Fill in the blanks with the other guys who.
I did not see Jonathan Kraft, although he might have been behind us somewhere in the building or in the room here. Excuse me.
And there were a number of other staffers who were here today. Bill O'Brien, I was told, was here as well. They were behind me, so I couldn't see exactly, but. Yeah, there are futures that are certainly up in the air. We saw Vangelo Bentley, one of their secondary coaches, has moved on during the year. Ross Douglas, who was a running backs coach, he moved on. So, players and coaches have uncertainty and unexplored things. The interesting thing is, as uncomfortable as that reality is, the job security of a New England Patriots coach is unmatched in the history of the current NFL. So you never want somebody to have to put together their resume and start making calls. It's not a comfortable place to be, but it is the nature of this business.
Right. When you get into this business, you understand that there might be changes like this one, even if you end up in New England working for Bill Belichick. And I've had a chance to speak to a couple people in different offices here with the team who have worked under Bill Belichick for years. And they anticipated this. They knew that this was not only a possibility, but a likelihood. And so I don't think you're going to get too many people in the building who were shocked, stunned by the news today. Again, it's part of the gig, but you also they experienced firsthand how this season played out, and they knew that change, in all likelihood, was imminent. This was a matter of time, according to people that I spoke to in the building earlier this morning.
So even though it wasn't a surprise, and I'm sure, we've kind of all played it out in our minds, how would this happen? What would this day be like? How did it compare to how it did play out, Tom? And I know you mentioned it, you've been through so many press conferences, but, this one obviously very different than any other press conference that you've been in.
Emotional day, no doubt, as the end of an era here.
To grade it, I would have to say it's a 10 for what we expected. Certainly there was no Q&A, but I understand that, Bill is not understanding Bill's persona. He doesn't want to sit there and have to answer questions relative to what's next, where will you go, where did it go wrong, what happened with Mac. Just say things on his terms and move on. So at the beginning of the day, I wouldn't have envisioned that as being the perfect way to do it. But in hindsight, this was a much better way to do it. Yeah, we'd like to hear from Bill Belichick, but in the end, that probably would have ended up being rancorous and fruitless. I think allowing Bill to make his points in the way that he did and to express his gratitude and thanks and give you an idea as a fan, hey, here's how he felt about you, which was the only time I thought that he seemed to choke up a little bit, maybe in discussing the fans and the interactions and the memories of fans. I think that was, to me, what what stood out. I think that it was a good event.
It was a little cleaner this way, right? Yeah. And I'm sure, of course, as reporters, we would love to ask questions, and there are still a lot of questions to ask Bill Belichick specifically. We'll get Robert Kraft a little bit later today, but this was a cleaner way to do it. And my guess is, guys, even something like this was negotiated, right? Does Bill Belichick really want to be up there talking to people? If he doesn't have to be, my guess would be no. Maybe he would have preferred a written statement, but if this was the agreement that they came to that was best for all parties, hey, let's do something in person, but we won't do the whole back and forth so you're not getting the questions that you don't want to get, Bill Belichick, then that's what they could work out. It's what ended up happening, and I'm glad it played out that way, because what we saw today would not have come across in a written statement.
Phil, one last quick question for you guys. What's next? What is the timeline, and what's the top priority now that the franchise is going to go in a different direction?
Yeah, the interview process for both head coach and general manager can get underway. Now, they can interview internal candidates as soon as right now. They virtually can interview external candidates right now. And so there is a process that they have to go to. They have to satisfy the Rooney Rule. They have to interview at least 2 external minority candidates. So this is going to take some time to fill both positions. But they're sort of on the same timeline now, Tom, that every other team is. They didn't really set themselves back. They're not behind the 8 ball because they waited a couple of days here to part ways with Bill Belichick.
Additionally, I think the Patriots DNA and all that Bill has wrought here, the Patriots definitely want to keep a connection too. So I would largely expect that most hirings will be promotions and in-house candidates.